Travelling in Italy seems to involve a big focus on food, doesn't it? Especially pasta and pizza. But what if you have allergies or are following a diet or protocol that you think may mean you're going to miss out on a lot of this experience? Let's find out how we can manage our dietary requirements and preferences in episode 258 of the Untold Italy podcast.
Ciao a tutti and benvenuti to Untold Italy, the travel podcast where you go to the towns and villages, mountains and lakes, hills and coastlines of Bella Italia. Each week your host, Katy Clarke, takes you on a journey in search of magical landscapes, history, culture, wine, gelato, and of course, a whole lot of pasta. If you're dreaming of Italy and planning future adventures there, you've come to the right place.
Buongiorno, hello friends. Hope 2025 has started off well, and if you're travelling this year, you have your plans well underway. I've just returned from Italy, Rome and the Dolomites, and it was, as always, glorious. I will give a detailed update on that trip on next week's episode, but today I wanted to address a topic that comes up regularly, and that's how to manage food allergies and requirements while you're travelling in Italy. I invited my friend Nesim from Full Belly Tours in Rome to help with this discussion. Nesim is a former chef and ongoing food lover, and what he doesn't know about eating in Italy is frankly not worth knowing. For those of you lucky enough to have joined one of Nesim's tours, you'll know he has enormous amounts of passion for helping people enjoy their time eating in Italy. And as he hosts many guests on his tours with allergies, I thought it would be great to have him share his knowledge on the show on this episode and another episode coming up that we recorded in late 2024. In this first episode, we address some general suggestions about interacting with restaurants and also delve into gluten intolerance and seafood and nut allergies. The conversation got quite long though, so we'll air the second half dealing with vegetarian and vegan diets and lactose intolerance in a couple of weeks. Before we begin though, I want to preface this discussion with the disclaimer that we are not doctors or health professionals and that you should always seek their advice first if you're unsure about how certain foods will impact your health. But let's dive in and hear about how we can manage our food allergies while we're in Italy now. Bentornato, Nesim. Welcome back to the Untold Italy podcast.
Hey, Katie. It's a pleasure to be back. Hello, everyone.
Hey, ciao. How are you doing, Nesim? What's been happening?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. We are happily at the end of the season. It's been a really fun, really busy year. And yeah, happy to get to a slower time of year when I can start thinking about possibly what new tours to offer next year, all of that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, it's been really, really good.
Oh, fantastic. Now, some people may not have heard of you, and I don't know who these people are, but they are going to know about you now. So can you give them a quick overview of what you do and how you got there?
I run a food tour company in Rome called Full Belly Tours. We offer kind of slightly more niche food tours, avoiding the kind of crazier parts of town with the aim of offering, a true Roman experience, what it's like to spend the night out in a less crazy part of the town, eating the way we locals eat and offering, the absolute best of what you can find here. And my background, I grew up here in Rome, even though I'm not Italian. My father's from Tunisia, my mom's French. I was born in DC and raised here in Rome. Both my parents were conference interpreters, so I was lucky to learn a bunch of languages growing up. And I've always worked in hospitality and fell into doing food tours because I actually couldn't work in kitchens anymore, because most of my background has been working in kitchens, which happily has given me the knowledge base to talk a lot about food.
Yes. And for those of you who are interested, you will leave one of Nesim's tours with a full belly for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to convey what would happen by the end of the tour. If you're interested in finding out a little more about Full Belly Tours, you can check out the website at fullbellytours.com, or you can reach out to me by email at info@fullbellytours.com.
Excellent. Now, As a food tour operator, I'm sure you get many requests to make adjustments to your tours for various dietary requirements. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm happy to accommodate the vast majority of requests. Unfortunately, one of the only ones that I can accommodate at the moment is gluten-free, simply because of the nature of a lot of the food in this country. It tends to be quite glutinous. But there are workarounds for most dietary restrictions when you're in this country. And so yeah, I figured it would be a good topic to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because we also run multi-day tours, obviously, with Untold Italy, and we have these requests as well. So I did think it would be great to chat about how people who do need to adjust their diet for whatever reason, because there's a lot of reasons, they're health reasons or allergy reasons, and which is also a health reason. I mean, everyone wants to make the most of their time in Italy, especially when it comes to food, because it's got such a great reputation for amazing food. So we don't want people to be disappointed. And I know you've got some great tips to share with everyone. So let's kick it off, shall we?
Absolutely.
So, what are some of the dietary restrictions and how we can manage them? How will we start this off?
We're going to cover like the main dietary restrictions: gluten-free, nut allergies, seafood allergies. Know that in general, even though Italy is such a popular food destination in particular, its cultural approach to food and dining doesn't always accommodate special diets. Most parts of this country, I half jokingly say, we're kind of stuck about 40, 50 years behind the rest of the world, which is wonderful for many things. But this also means that people view dietary restrictions, allergies, dietary preferences the same way that most countries did 40, 50 years ago. So they don't necessarily cater to them, and they don't necessarily understand a lot of them. I feel that in general, this country doesn't cater particularly well or willingly to special dietary needs. They'll do so if they have to. But therefore, if you see places that advertise, gluten-free, lactose-free, especially if it's like big lettering on a large menu outside of the restaurant, that's probably not a good sign. That being said, there are a lot of younger chefs and newer restaurant owners that are more accommodating and are making more and more plant-based dishes and often keep dietary restrictions in mind and are more accommodating of them. But let's say that more of the old school establishments don't necessarily understand them or don't necessarily cater to them, in part because this can also be a cultural thing. Many of the older generations in this country have lived through wars where they couldn't afford things like meat. And so it became, one of these things that you kind of dream about. It's like these things that you not fetishize, but, things that you really look forward to having. And they're like these luxuries that you can afford to. So to give up things like animal protein willingly, to a lot of Italians, they just don't understand at the outset. But as I said, this is a country that has an incredible variety of food, and there's easier ways to navigate most dietary restrictions while being able to make the most of your time here.
I was going to say that I think understanding the menus and particularly the regional menus and the dishes is probably going to be key to success in this situation.
Italian food is super regional, much more so than most other countries, because up until about 150 years ago, Italy was a bunch of independent city-states that were often at war with each other and didn't necessarily trade, especially food goods, which is why every 10, 15 kilometers or miles you have new cheeses, pasta shapes, wines, cured meats. So it's very true that if you have specific things, foods that you're trying to avoid, if you look at the regionality of the cuisines, picking regions that have things that cater more to your diet will make more sense. For example, say you're lactose intolerant or have problems with dairy in general, going to, very northern mountainous regions maybe isn't the best thing for you diet-wise, because there's going to be lots of butter and cheese and cream, because they need this kind of heartier fare, because traditionally they were trudging around the mountains in the snow and they needed, richer, fattier foods. So going to more southern regions that have a far wider variety of vegetables, that have cheeses that are based on, sheep or goat that already have less lactose in them, are easier to digest, you'll probably find a lot more options, that'll fit the dietary things that you're looking for. Technically, Italian law does require restaurants to list allergens on the menus, either on the menu itself or through a separate kind of booklet. However, like many things in this country, this is actually rarely enforced. And so you don't necessarily find it as frequently as you will. But I think that one of the most important things is to communicate any dietary restriction or any allergy earlier in the conversation. Like, begin your interaction by clearly stating that you have, a dietary preference. And you could say, salve, sono allergico or sono allergica. And then you would let them know. Salve means hello. I think it's always good to, be friendly and polite, because you kind of want your server to be on your side. And so by being nice, that already gets you halfway there. If you have severe allergies, definitely specify that. So you would say, salve, sono severamente allergico or allergica. And you could continue with, ci sono piatti che devo evitare? Are there dishes I should avoid? So be precise, but remember to be courteous, because, as I said, having your waiter on your side is like half the battle. And if you do have serious allergies, would say that double checking when the dish arrives is not the worst idea in the world. This may feel repetitive or annoying, but I think it's better to endure a little awkwardness than to risk a severe allergic reaction. And I find that if you're like apologetic about double checking when the food arrives and make light of the situation, you kind of joke about it, it should make the interaction more pleasant in general. Obviously, always carry what meds you may need: antihistamines, EpiPens. They're not that easy to find, especially if you're not in large cities. You often need prescriptions for EpiPens and stuff. So having whatever you need with you, just in case, is always a good idea. I find a lot of people don't understand why restaurants cannot cater or will sometimes refuse to cater to special requests. I think one of the things that most people don't realize is that restaurants operate with a highly structured kitchen workflow. I think of restaurants as motors. So if every single person in the restaurant, therefore every part of the motor, is doing their job properly, it runs smoothly and it's a beautiful thing. If one of those parts gets slowed down or starts messing up, it's a chain reaction and it messes everything else up. There's a tremendous amount of prep work is done before service starts to provide a specific number of each dish on the menu, depending on the service. So whether it's lunch or dinner, depending on the day of the week, and the number of reservations for that day. So requests for off-menu items or making significant modifications to food, even if it's something as simple as just a pasta with tomato sauce, can actually disrupt that entire system, slowing down the service for everyone. And so many places just can't afford to accommodate requests because it's going to mess up the entire service. So if they can't accommodate any request you may have, remember that it's never personal. It's just that most kitchens are not set up for flexibility. And understanding this can help avoid frustration or disappointment. I was trying to think of an analogy. What I came up with was, imagine going to a movie theater and demanding to see a movie that the theater isn't offering, or demanding to see a movie that they're offering but at a different time. that seems a little unreasonable, right? And so that's kind of like what it's like to go into a restaurant and ask for something that's not on the menu.
Yeah, so I think maybe some people, and particularly from the United States, might be used to making those requests and having it met quite easily. So is there a difference between kitchens in the United States and in Italy?
Oh, absolutely. And in general, I find the approach to customer service is very different. I half joke about this on tour. I feel that in Italy and many parts of Europe, the customer is rarely right, especially in relation to food. And there's also a different tipping culture. People don't tip as much. And so there's less of, let's say, an incentive to make sure that your every request is met, that request being met with a smile. So there's definitely a different approach to customer service in general. And because of this, restaurants aren't necessarily as accommodating because in part of what I was saying before, they're like, look, we have a menu. There are things on the menu that you could order. And if you don't, we're very sorry, but maybe find a place that can cater to whatever, your needs are. I have a very good friend who's a restaurant owner, and he's unfortunately starting to get bad reviews because they don't offer spritzes or Negronis, or they may not be able to make a pasta with tomato sauce during service. Respect the fact that many restaurants stick to their traditional menus. So if you do a little research and make a list of places that will be able to accommodate your specific dietary needs, it'll make everyone's experience much more enjoyable. I feel it's a little unfair to negatively review places just because they can accommodate your specific needs, especially if you didn't reach out to them beforehand to make sure that that was the case.
I think it's difficult, isn't it? And where do you go to do the research? And I know you're going to cover a few things here, especially when you're going somewhere that's abroad and you don't know. When we try and give a lot of recommendations, we have, and you've been so generous in giving those recommendations over the years. So I think, yeah, definitely listen to some locals and find out where to go and do some research on the actual dishes that are available. It's such a great idea because you don't want to be hangry in Rome, especially in the centre, because there can be some waits and stuff when it's very busy, and you want to make sure that you're getting the experience that you want to have. And I think there's plenty of opportunity to do that. You just need to be a little bit organised, right?
Yes, no, absolutely. And look, I admit my wife and I travel specifically for food. That is the first thing that we look at whenever we're going somewhere. We figure out where we want to eat, we make the necessary reservations, and then we basically plan all of our other activities, our non-food activities around that. And I'm not saying that's how everyone should travel. And we don't end up sticking to that itinerary. Reservations might change, plans may change. But I find that having an idea and making some reservations so that you know that you'll be able to eat in the places you want to kind of guarantees that you're going to be able to enjoy all of the great food that you were planning on. So in general, I think it's a good idea to do some research, plan ahead, and make reservations, whether or not you have, any specific dietary needs. But especially so in a country that doesn't necessarily accommodate a lot of these dietary needs readily. One of the most obvious examples where you can run into a harder time in Italy in particular is gluten-free dining. As I was saying, simply based off of the nature of a lot of Italian foods, pizza, pasta, breads, baked goods, it's not the easiest thing in the world to find gluten-free foods and gluten-free options. That being said, Italy is one of the leading countries in recognizing celiac disease, and they have better gluten-free products than I've tried in most other parts of the world. Ironically, I am actually intolerant to gluten, but I find that in many places that use heirloom varieties of wheat that haven't been genetically modified to withstand any temperature or pest, or, that have been, processed for output rather than quality. The products that they make with these flours are often more easily digestible, apart from being more delicious. And so actually many people that have kind of gastrointestinal distress consuming glutinous products in more industrialized food chains will often not have the same effects or the same intensity of effects when eating in European countries. And I've actually had, apart from experiencing it myself, I've had dozens of guests on tour that have mentioned the same thing. If you're looking for gluten-free products in this country, ironically, you're going to look for them in pharmacies. There's an increasing number of supermarkets that are providing gluten-free products, but they're mostly found in pharmacies in this country. And actually, if you're diagnosed with having celiac disease in Italy, the government gives you, last time I checked, it was 140 euros a month to spend on gluten-free food products. So it is a thing they do. The government tries to accommodate and help out with this. It's just that a lot of restaurants don't necessarily. It's also true that many European countries, especially Southern European countries, rarely add manufactured gluten to foods. Gluten is basically produced by, when you wet flour, there's two molecules called glutenin and gliadin that, as you work the dough, make gluten. And the longer you work it, the more gluten you develop. And it's what makes doughs kind of stretchy, elastic, and allows you to make things like pizza, pasta, those sourdough breads with the lovely big bubbles in the middle. A lot of industrialized food chains now make gluten by making dough, and then you wash out all of the flour part of it, and you're just left with gluten that you dry out, powder, and you can add to dishes or to breads and things so that you don't need to spend as much time actually working the dough. So you can make more food in a faster amount of time at a cheaper price. But like anything else, the more industrialized the food chain, the less digestible, the harder it's going to be on your digestive system in general. There are restaurants that specifically cater to gluten-free diets, but they tend to be newer establishments and that are often catering to tourists, not locals. These tourist-focused restaurants tend to lack authenticity. They don't necessarily offer like a set of regional dishes. They kind of try to give you the greatest hits that people are familiar with, like lasagna and, carbonara and pizza, and which, are regional things that you should actually find in different kinds of dining establishments. And since these places often lack authenticity, their food quality may often be more mediocre in comparison to traditional old school places. And since Italian food is based on the quality of the ingredient, if they're not offering the quality necessary, the food will never be as good as it should be. So I'm not saying that they're all tourist traps, but they don't necessarily offer the same quality as the best places that you could find. And some genuinely great gluten-free restaurants exist, and, there's an increasing focus towards providing food for people that do have dietary requirements, but they're rare and often specialized, which is why taking the time to do your research matters. There's actually the largest governing, well, it's not a governing body, but there's an association in Italy called AIC, which stands for Associazione Italiana Celiachia, which is the Italian Association for Celiacs. They have like a whole page where they talk about restaurants that they recommend. And so, they have some of these pages in English. So it's a good resource, let's say, to use if gluten-free is one of the things that you're looking for. To make sure that restaurants can accommodate you, call ahead. Many traditional restaurants don't advertise gluten-free options, but can accommodate requests, especially if notified in advance. So a quick phone call or, an email, although I recommend calling. A quick phone call can save you, a lot of trouble and make sure that you'll actually be able to eat the things that you're hoping to eat. And one thing to keep in mind, especially if you're celiac and it's like a more serious condition, beware that cross-contamination can be very present if it's a restaurant that doesn't only serve gluten-free food, because kitchens may not have separate spaces to prepare those gluten-free options. This is especially true for items like pizza, where like flour can linger in ovens or prep areas. So keep that in mind. If you do have something like celiac disease, let the people know that even cross-contamination is something that they need to be aware of.
Yeah, we've had a few people like that on our tours, and we have cooking classes. Often we're using flour and making pasta and stuff. We've managed to make it work, which has been fantastic. I'm so thrilled to be able to do that. But yeah, it is definitely a concern. We always asked, can you handle the cross contamination, because it can really be a problem. Thanks for that. Yes, there's a lot of gluten-free issues, and I love that resource, the Gluten-Free Association in Italy. It's fantastic. What's next? What other allergies do we need to deal with?
So another very common one are seafood allergies. And Italy is a long peninsula sticking out into the Mediterranean. So many regions have coastlines. And so seafood is, part of many of the region's foods, like traditional dishes. But especially regions that are known for their coastlines, like Liguria up north or Sicily, Puglia, the Amalfi Coast, are famous for seafood heavy dishes, which means that cross-contamination is a common concern. It's something that in a very busy service, may get overlooked. The cook may not be thinking fully because they're doing, a million things at a time, and they may prepare a dish that doesn't physically contain any seafood, but may have been prepared on a shared surface like a griddle or a deep fat fryer. So those are regular culprits, shared cooking services that are being used for fish and non-fish items. So be sure to specify, especially if it's severe, because this is the kind of thing that unfortunately in the rush of a busy service can sometimes get overlooked. And another thing to keep in mind is Italians use anchovies in even many non-seafood based dishes, because fermented fish products give a tremendous amount of umami to dishes. Umami is like the fifth flavor that was identified by the Japanese. It's like that savory quality in food. And it's the equivalent of like Southeast Asian cuisines using fish sauce or many fermented fish products. And so condiments like salsa verde up north, or even olive tapenades, often contain anchovies. And so, double checking that, nothing you're ingesting has these kind of things is a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually had this happen in our family. My sister-in-law is very, very allergic to seafood, and we were having a delicious lunch in the mountains in Tuscany. We did have the olive tapenade, and she was pregnant at the time, and her lips,
Oh, no.
she had a tiny little bit. She knew exactly what to do. Luckily, she had her EpiPen with her. But yeah, I learned very quickly to check for anchovies when we were traveling around with them.
Yeah, and there's other dishes. There's equivalent of ancient Italian fish sauce, which was called garum, which now they have an equivalent called Colatura di Alici. The most famous town is actually on the Amalfi Coast. But yeah, these kinds of ingredients can sometimes end up in your food and aren't necessarily listed. Not necessarily one of the driving flavors in the dish. Rather, it's a supporting character to kind of make everything else sing. So yeah, that's why, as I was saying, starting out with a clear communication and conveying everything you need, or everything you need to avoid at the beginning, is a good idea. And especially if it is, a more serious concern, make sure to convey the importance of that.
Yeah. Now, what about nuts?
Another obviously very common allergy that people have, and nuts and seeds you can find in many Italian dishes, especially desserts. But, dishes like pesto, which the traditional recipe is based off of pine nuts, or even the Sicilian caponata, that kind of, say, ratatouille made with, eggplant and bell peppers, onions, zucchini, are often seasoned or have featured almonds and or pine nuts. And so double checking is always a good idea. And a lot of the sweets, as I was saying, are based on, nuts and seeds. For example, one of my favorite sweet treats that you find here in Rome are called brutti ma buoni, which the name is pretty hilarious. They mean ugly but good. And it's basically a little hazelnut meringue. So the ingredients are super simple: egg white, sugar, vanilla, and ground hazelnuts. And the name kind of refers to the fact that they may look like what our four-legged friends leave behind on a walk. They have the most appetizing look in the world. But yeah, there are many dishes like that, or torta de la nonna, which is like a pastry cream tart that has pine nuts either in the dough or on top of it. So especially when it comes to sweets, because especially there you can have cross-contamination happen a lot more frequently, something to keep an eye out for. And beware that certain cold cuts can contain nuts. They'll make like special salami that, have pistachios or other nuts in them, depending on where the salamis are made from. The most common one I can think of is mortadella, which is kind of the ancestor of bologna, hailing from the city of Bologna, that traditionally does contain pistachios. They do make some without pistachios, in great part for people that, need to avoid nuts. But something to keep an eye out for. You won't necessarily find it listed as part of the obvious ingredients. So make sure that you convey the need to avoid them. And the other thing I can think of that is relevant is cooking oils, especially frying oils. Most Italians do not fry with extra virgin olive oil because it has a very low smoke point. The smoke point is the temperature at which a fat is going to start burning and breaking down. Extra virgin olive oil, the smoke point is actually lower than, the ideal frying temperature. And so most Italian kitchens actually use sunflower or peanut oils or mixed seed oils for frying.
Wow, I'm surprised about that.
Yeah, peanut oil is actually one of the best fats to cook with at high temperatures because it has some of the highest smoke points. I only remember these in Fahrenheit because I learned these when I was working in the US. But extra virgin olive oil, the smoke point is about 250 degrees Fahrenheit, which is below kind of ideal frying temperature, tends to be around 350, 375, which is what most like nut and seed oils are. Whereas peanut oil, avocado oil, and grapeseed oil all have smoke points of above 500 degrees. And so they're especially good for something like high heat cooking, like searing steaks and that kind of stuff. But yeah, sunflower oil is actually one of the most common in Italy, much more than many other countries. And so it's, a good idea if you're getting fried foods to confirm what type of oil they're using. That being said, not all allergies will be affected by frying with that kind of oil because some of the allergens will be in the kind of solid part and not the fatty part. And so I have had guests on tour that are allergic to peanuts but can eat foods that have been deep fried in peanut oil. So it's important to find out with your doctor, if you don't already know, what exactly it is that you need to avoid.
So complicated, isn't it? Unfortunately for people, it's you just want to relax and have a nice vacation. But I mean, like what we're trying to do here is demystify things a little bit so that you can relax. And if you know the type of dishes that you can order and what to ask, then it becomes a little bit easier to navigate, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, gluten-free travellers and those with seafood and nut allergies, I do hope you found that discussion useful. As always, it's best to be prepared and do some research before you go to relieve any anxiety you may have about travelling and manage those health concerns. Another tip I wanted to share with you is that you can also buy flashcards or cards that you can give to restaurants that have key phrases related to your allergy translated into Italian. And I'll pop a link to those into the show notes. You can easily do that or find them on Amazon. Lastly, make sure any tour or activity provider that you engage is listening to your needs and understands your challenges. Our small group tour team are wonderful at adjusting menu selections for different requirements and go out of their way to make sure that you have a wonderful time enjoying Italian food, as I know Nesim does on his tours also. Of course, we put a transcript of this episode, Nesim's details and much more into the show notes at untolditaly.com/258 for episode number 258. Now, if you're interested in how to eat vegetarian or vegan while in Italy, or you're managing a lactose intolerance, look out for the continuation of this episode in a few weeks' time. Grazie mille. Thank you for your ongoing support of Untold Italy. We truly appreciate all of you, our wonderful listeners joining us from all around the world. And we'd love it if you help spread the word so we can reach more Italy-loving travellers just like you. And the best way that you can do this is by leaving us a 5-star rating or review on your favourite podcast app, or forwarding this episode onto a friend who also loves colourful towns, delightful local customs, and the magic of regional Italy. Next time, I'm going to give an update on my recent winter wonderland trip to Italy, including the situation in Rome now that the Jubilee is in full swing. But until then, it's ciao for now.
The Untold Italy podcast is an independent production. Podcast editing, audio production and website development by Mark Hatter, production assistance and content writing by the other Katy Clarke. Yes, there are two of us. For more information about Untold Italy, please visit untolditaly.com.